Okay, so welcome to day 2 of our CPD Accredited Digital Talks, and welcome back to those who joined us yesterday. My name is Kelly Easton, and I'm the Program Director for the African Construction and Totally Concrete Expo. Today's session is once again supported and accredited by SAIBD, and the presenter is our good friend Videsh Boodu, SAIBD's National President. Before we begin, kindly send us your SACAP registration number. You can send that to Zara Eccles, and her email address will be placed in the chat. If you've already sent your SACAP registration number yesterday, there is no need to resend it. Please note that attendance is monitored and you are required to stay the full session to claim your points, which will be 0.1 credits. Please post all your questions in the Q&A box for Videsh and leave all comments in the chat box. And of course, that includes all greetings. Please enjoy this morning, and should we not be able to get to your question during the time that we do have, we will ask Videsh to answer it at a later stage and send those answers through to you. So please enjoy, and thank you again for attending. Thank you, Videsh.
Thank you, Kelly. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our SAIBD's free CPD events that we have normally 3 times a year, but obviously due to COVID, this is the first time we're doing these digital talks. And I must say, yesterday's event went very well. So if y'all did miss it, I know that DMG has recorded it and would put it up or available for people to watch. Having said that, today's topic is understanding the changes to the industry standards and its impacts on the architectural profession. Basically, the national building regulations and the related SANS revisions. Before I start with the presentation, hopefully the presentation is not going to be too long, and I'm going to allow for a Q&A session all within the next hour. I would encourage delegates here to please put in your questions under the Q&A. Note that I'm not going to be really looking at the chat. That will ask me to do 3 things. So I'll look at the chat after the event. For now, I will be looking at the Q&A. So I will answer your questions under the Q&A or whatever is in the Q&A I will look at. Having said that, there is a paradigm, or there is a general thought or general method that's in the architectural industry, and I would say the whole built environment professionals, including developers, etc. And that is to take a very laid-back attitude towards the law or changes in the law. I hope y'all can hear me better. So I was saying that most built environment or persons concerned in the built environment take a very laid-back attitude towards changes that occur, legal and standards and deemed to satisfy standards, which I find a bit appalling, because we all have a chance to comment and make our voices heard. And if we don't take that opportunity to make our voices heard, then complaining about it is almost futile. we need to be involved. I know SAIBD informs their mailing list when changes are out for public comment. Currently, for example, we have Part L, which is roofs. That's going to go out for public comment. Or, sorry, the public comment is closing next week sometime, if I'm not mistaken. You would have got a notification from SAIBD. A few years ago, the NBR went out for, well, let's just say there was a white paper for that, and we asked for comments. We were involved in discussions on how it is to be changed. There was very little input from the built environment professionals. So complaining about it after the fact is I'm going to say a little bit sad. If you're not on a SAIBD's mailing list, your address now will you will get added on, but try to, I mean, just encouraging everyone, try to be more involved. For example, there are many voluntary associations in South Africa. I can't remember the exact number, it's more than 10. There's only 3 voluntary associations represented on the SANS TC60 committee. Remember, individuals cannot be represented there, and only associations or organizations, etc. So why are only 3 voluntary associations represented on a committee that has, I don't know, 60 odd members? So the voice of the voluntary or the majority of the architectural professionals are not heard. I encourage other voluntary or members of other voluntary associations to apply. Make your voices heard. There are literally maybe less than a handful of architectural professionals that sit on this committee. It has a direct effect on how we design, on the end product of what we do. It has a direct effect on that. So, yes, I beg of the architectural professionals, get involved. If you are notified of a change and it's out for public comment, then I would encourage you to read the document, peruse it. You would have to anyway, because it's going to change and it's going to affect your life. So read it up front. And if you find there's something wrong, or it's going to have a negative effect and not suited to the outcome or the intent of that standard or that law, make your voice heard. So having said that, a 10-minute little introduction on and trying to encourage the professionals, developers, to get involved in the development of the standards. So before I start with my slideshow, there's a question by Charles. What is your view on the foreseeable changes in the industry standards posed by the COVID-19 pandemic. Personally, what changes would you propose in line with this? I can't really answer that. I think I'll revert back to an email response on that question. I haven't really given that much thought, so I'll revert back to a email response on that question. Having said that, I want to do a presentation, an explanation on what changes are going to come, what changes have happened already. For example, Part T, the new Part T has been published in February and allowing the 6 months changeover as per the National Building Regulations. It is in effect. So people that don't know, sandstone 400 Part T, which is fire, which went out for comment last year, has been published. And it has a major effect on the way we design. There are some parts of it that do have an effect. So having said that, I'm going to start sharing my screen. So just to confirm, when we do plan applications or when we design or building applications, should I say, the correct term is building applications, we do not do this in terms of the national standards or the SANS. We actually do this in terms of the National Building Regulations and Standards Act 103 of 1977. Section 4 to be more precise. So many people are of the opinion that the application is in terms of a standard. It's not. It's in terms of a law. And many people don't actually read the law. It's a very interesting read, so I encourage you all to read that. So the law is made up of 3 parts, and those 3 parts are the Building Standards Act 103 of 1977, and we do our application, for example, to the municipalities under that number 1, which is the Building Standards Act. We then have regulations. The thing is to remember that these 3 parts are written into one document called the National Building Regulations, or NBR for short. So within the one document, you have the Act, you have the regulations, and you have the review board regulations. The thing with the review board regulations is that after some court cases, it was found unconstitutional. So you cannot do a review. If the municipality has refused your application, in the past you could apply to the review board. You can't at the moment. The Act has been amended although it's a 77 Act, it was amended in 82, 84, 89, 1995, 1996, and 2008. The new revision is being worked on. It's actually, I believe, going to be separated You know, the three different parts are going to be separated, and they're working on the act at the moment, which is the law. So they want to separate the law and the standards and the review board or the review of it, if that is still applicable. That was another long discussion. So that's what the future is going to hold. Some of the parts that were that might be removed, for example, or highly amended, is Section 7. Those professionals and built environment or people involved in the built environment will remember that the Tikweni municipality was very strict with Section 7 of the Act. The thing is that Section 7 is a subjective part of the Act. It is the only subjective part of the Act. Everything else in the Act you could say is objective, or I would say is objective. Section 7 is literally subjective. And if a municipality allows just one person to make a decision on a subjective matter, that is wrong. And that, I think, was where the problems were coming in. For the Act says that the local authority, and then the definition of a local authority is a full council. So that's a group of people. And the only reason it says that is because it's a subjective matter. That's the way I see it. Subjective matter, it's a feeling. People work on feelings. So the majority vote of a group of people is what will inform Section 7. The qualifications of the BCO could possibly be amended. As we all know that SACAP has now started the process of registering plans examiners and BCOs. The past, the BCO, the qualifications were, I'm not going to say arbitrary, but a plumber could be a BCO. Now, I'm not putting plumbers down, and hey, plumbers do really good work. You know, controlling water and preventing leaks and preventing pollution from sewer is really important work. But I think that's where the problem came in. Many in the past, let's just say we need more qualified or regulated BCOs and plans examiners, etc. So that could possibly be amended. The other major difference going forward would be that there are exempt buildings at the moment, including national key points, tribal and rural buildings, or buildings within tribal and rural areas, government buildings, and informal settlements. Going forward, all these buildings will be subject to the law, including informal settlements. Obviously, a whole new sets of standards, etc., would have to be written out. That obviously will come in time. There is a question by Lavelle. How can professionals get involved in developing and improving on the SANS documents in order to shape the industry? Two methods. One is if there are any associations for the built environment, whether it is a voluntary association for architecture, a ratepayers group, etc. Those can apply to sit on the SANS TC60 committee. Just note that no individuals are allowed to sit on a committee or an individual representing a organization. And then the second method is obviously when these laws or standards are due to be amended, it has to go through a public um, notification phase. That includes, commenting and stuff like that. I know SAIBD, for example, is very active in informing its members about this and commenting. So yes, if you all get notifications, look at it. If you don't understand or if you have some questions, write to the person that informed you at least, and that's how you can get involved. Just very quickly, I'm doing questions as they almost as they come in. Just remember these internet webinar type sessions. I think if I have 60 questions towards the end, it's going to be difficult, or it'll take longer to address the question. So if the question is relevant to what I'm speaking about at the moment, I'll stop and answer those questions. I will leave a few for the end. Vidette is asking, will existing structures need to be changed to comply, namely informal settlements? Okay, laws are never retrospective. So even the current national NBR states that it is not retrospective in nature. So buildings that were approved or prior to the act coming into place were deemed to be compliant. So you don't have to change any approved building. There is one other problem I'm going to talk about, and thanks, Vidette, for reminding me of this, is the fact that the exempt buildings, as they were never approved because they were exempt, as soon as you do a change now, some municipalities are asking that the whole building must comply with the law because it was never approved. And that I find problematic. So one of the changes envisioned is that if the owner can prove, using many methods, methods like historical aerial photographs, documentation, when the property was sold, title deeds, etc., does inform the municipality of, or you can deduce from that kind of information approximately when that building was in existence. And they want to then reintroduce what we in the old days used to call the happy letter. The happy letter is the BCO will then, again, these are just proposals, hey? So it might not happen that way, but this was what was discussed at the meetings, is that with the happy letter, the building inspector is basically saying, we deem the building compliant as it is pre-act, and or something of that sort. Obviously, anything new you do will have to comply. I hope I've answered that question, Vidette. The other thing is informal settlements. The one reason that people want, or the laws include and cover informal settlements, is that, for example, I'll just give two examples. Access to some parts of the informal settlements are impossible for ambulances or emergency services, from fire to ambulances, etc. So I think, or I believe that is what is envisioned, to allow enough space within the informal settlement to allow for emergency services to get in and to allow for potable water, and somehow develop a method of waste disposal, because the problem is, people don't know me. I'm from Durban, but travel throughout the country, and whenever so I obviously encounter the informal settlements in my locale, which is Durban. But whenever I travel the country, also, you see the informal settlements, and you see how pollution is happening around these informal settlements. So the law is going to be written around trying to prevent pollution and save lives. There's a question from Gareth Williams. Good morning, Videsh. Good morning, Gareth. How can the buildings become part of that law if the types of building have not been clearly defined? Informal settlements, yes, I think I've already covered that. Obviously, if the law is being rewritten, there will be new definitions and categories of building out. I just hope, this is just my personal comment here, I just hope that it doesn't become discriminatory, where you got a lower middle income type settlement or area. Adjacent to that, you have informal settlements, and informal settlements are allowed to do or allowed to build in such a way, or get away. Let's just say get away with too much, and his neighbor, who is now formal, cannot get away with it, and has to spend thousands or 20% of the building of his building cost just to do something that seemingly other people can get away with, and that then becomes discrimination. I'm not sure how they're going to handle that. So I hope I've answered that question, Gareth. I'm going to take one more question and continue with my slide for now, or two more. This is from Miles Hollins. What is Section 7 of the Act? Okay, I'm going to talk from memory. I don't have the Act open in front of me. But the whole process of building application is such that you make an application to the municipality for permission to build. Many people refer to it as plan application. It's not a plan application. It is a permission to build, an application to be permitted to do a construction. That's what the application is for. So obviously your application must show that you have complied with the law, that your design of the building is compliant with the intent of the law. And that's where the standards and all of that come in. Right. Section 7 then, so before I go to Section 7, Section 6 basically mandates the building control officer to see that your application complies with the relevant laws and the intent of those laws and the standards, obviously. So SANS 10400, for example. He does not approve the plan. So the BCO, the building control officer's only mandate under the law is to then make a recommendation whether the plan should be approved or not. So when many people say the building inspector is not approving the plan, it is not the building inspector that actually approves the plan. He just makes a recommendation. Only the local authority, and I'm just going to qualify that by saying the local authority is basically a council, your councillors. A council has the mandate to approve your plan. So what the council does is take the recommendation from the BCO, and the BCO is going to say the proposal complies with all the relevant standards and therefore should be approved. So that's his recommendation. Or it doesn't comply and therefore should not be approved. Okay, so that's his recommendation. The local authority will then say, and it can be, sorry, before I go on, the local authority can delegate its power. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a full sitting of the council. But from my understanding, it needs to be a group of people. It cannot be a person because it's subjective matter. So they can delegate that power. That group of people will then ask 3 relevant questions. And I can't remember I can't quote the questions, but I can say what, my take of it. And those questions are basically, will the building or will the proposal derogate from the neighborhood? Will the proposal, for example, reduce the value of the neighborhood? And it's questions like that. It's basically, well, is the building pretty enough to be built? Is it going to improve the value of the neighborhood or reduce the value of the neighborhood? And those questions then can be subjective. I hope I've explained what Section 7 of the Act is. After those questions are answered, by the way, then your application is approved or not. Audrey Boshoff, does farmhouses fall under point 4? Okay, so I think you are asking if farmhouses or rural buildings need a building application. Currently, yes. I think the only, when I said rural, I'm talking about the old Zulu land, tribal land, let's just say, or land that falls under chieftains. Those are exempt from the Act. Having said that, I know in the Eastern Cape, it's been pointed out to me, and there is billboards up that the municipality has put up that says that if you build a rondavel using traditional methods, so an adobe type wall with thatch, for example, the building is illegal. Notwithstanding the fact that, okay, if it's the land is not exempt, you can still do a building application. The way that is written, and my interpretation is that the municipality is saying that you cannot build with adobe walls and thatch. That is wrong. The municipality is wrong. Because at the end of the day, there is no deemed to satisfy rule for example, the adobe type walls. But an engineer can sign it off. The next question is, why is there no standard? Why is it not deemed to satisfy? Because adobe type walls have stood the test of time for thousands of years. There are buildings that are still standing that are built out of adobe. So I'm just posing that question. I have my own take on why that exists. And I'll just throw in a word, predatory capitalism there, without any evidence, but that's what it appears like. And that's my own personal view for now. But adobe type walls in a traditional type building should be approved because they've stood the test of time. If it hasn't failed for thousands of years, why will it fail now? The first question. The second question is that SABS then would need to maybe drop standards for it. There was a proposal to drop standards for it, and there was even a number to the standard. The number is SANS 10401, which has been withdrawn. So, Audrey, I've answered that question. I see 4 more open questions. I'm going to carry on with my presentation right now, and I'll get back to these questions. Just trying to keep time. I notice I've gone half an hour, and there's still a lot here to do. So Let me go through my slide because there's some important stuff there that needs to be addressed. All right. So, having said that, building standards, the future, I've done that. I've already spoken about the happy letter. So that's in the pipeline. The history of the regulations. 1990 was when the regulations were actually made. 91, it comes into operation. And it took 16 years. So within 1 year, it became from being made to become operational. And it took 16 years for the first change. That's on the 30th of May 2008. Was, I would say, the first time it got amended. That's 16 years later. And then within 3 years, on 9th of September 2011, XA came about. So, and we know that it's going to change again relatively soon. The deemed to satisfy, so the regulations then relate to the deemed to satisfy standards. And that's a list of the deemed to satisfy standards. I just want to point out that, sorry, I went too far, but under the columns 10400T, fire protection, I've got the date 2011, edition 3. It is now edition 4 and February 2020. So that's a little error on the slideshow itself, but that has been amended. Okay. And that's a full list. Kelly, just confirm, but I believe this is being recorded and will be available for delegates or people to watch later.
That's correct, Videsh.
Okay. So, and if people want this information, they can email and I can pass on this information. Okay. The foreseeable future of water usage in buildings. There were public comment documents out already. I'm not too sure how many people commented, but some of the parts were a bit discriminatory, and we have made some comment on that. So I'm trying to rush through now, and I'll get so I can have more time for the questions. But sandstone 400 B and D, balustrades. They are deemed to satisfy rules for brick type balustrades. Right. These balustrades that you could see here, these aluminium and wire and glass type balustrades, there is no deemed to satisfy rules. But it is a structural element, and it's a safety element that has a structural component to it. Going forward, you would have to get an engineer to certify the balustrades. I know that many, and I've seen plan applications where they just say 1,000 high balustrade to owner's choice. You cannot leave it to owner's choice. You could, in theory, if you wanted to, but you have to put a qualifier to that and say to engineers' details, and an engineer needs to be appointed for it. Okay. Most BCOs also overlook the, I mean, I've walked on sites where being constructed or prior to occupation certificates where bolts holding the balustrades are loose, not fixed properly. A hard push with my hand and that balustrade will fall over. And BCOs overlook it. I feel that's their duty. If they see that on site, and you as professionals, if you see that on site, you need to point it out. There shouldn't be an occupation certificate if there is a health and safety risk. Part T, fire. Remember, this was already amended and the new one is out and applicable it's dated February 2020. The first thing I need to point out is the blue is a travel path, or the escape travel path. Traditionally, most people calculate the travel distance, whether it's 45 or 60-meter max, using the red lines, the thick red line shown on this plan view. That is incorrect. The correct method would be to follow the blue line, the natural way someone would walk through after furniture is installed in the building. So even if you're not designing the furniture, you need to consider what would be a natural usage and escape route. You'll notice that the blue line is much longer than the red line. So when you're doing your calculations, take this into account. The escape travel path down the stair, again, most people only do the plan view, which would be the red line. I know this is a section, but I can only demonstrate this not on plan, but on section. So the red line distance would be what most people would calculate. I say that's, and the code is saying that that is wrong. The blue line, the thick blue line shown on this section, that is the correct method of calculating the travel distance. Notice that the blue line would be longer than the red line. The FIOS reel, just say you're doing a 30-meter distance. Most people just draw a 30-meter radius from the point of where they want to install a hose reel. Again, that's wrong. The reach of the FIOS reel must be similar to this calculation. How would you naturally pull the reel? And obviously, if you do this, you'll notice that you might need more FIOS reels or longer FIOS reels. Okay. Refuge areas, that's been amended. In the past, under revision 3, only a competent person, fire engineering, could design this. I actually didn't inspect the new version. I know we commented on it. That's why I didn't amend this here lately. But that is wrong. Even if you look at a qualification point of view, the internal spaces of a building, or what people would say is the empty space of a building, is the mandate of the architect. So how a disabled person in a wheelchair accesses this space and how much space is required for it is the mandate of an architect, not a fire engineer. Not to say he doesn't know, but the exclusion then is discriminatory. And competence, the very definition of competence then is wrong. I hope it has been changed. And again, I'm not the expert on the revised one. I'll have to go and double check that. There's examples of what a refuge area should look like. It is very different to how it was described under revision 3. Okay. The bottom example is my example of a building that we've done. Nothing stops you also from getting data for how, the space a wheelchair requires, the space a companion requires, because the law says, or under revision 3, it was a wheelchair and a companion, so that there showed my research for the space requirements. Part T, other major change is the fact that fire detection systems has been expanded on quite a bit. Almost every public building will have to have a fire detection and alarm system. And Table 10 dictates the type of detection and alarm system. So that's a list of buildings with the detection type and alarm system types that need to be installed. And that's the end of the table. Luckily, an H4 here doesn't require it. There was arguments, or the original version that went for public comment did say that an H4 would require it. And the issue I have is, yes, in America, for example, most houses have a detection system. But then you consider that in America, most houses are constructed of combustible material. Timber and lightweight cladding. Most of the houses in South Africa don't use timber and lightweight cladding or that type, stud and cladding type construction. So just by including that here would not suit the South African environment. Please ensure that in future or going forward that you allow for fire detection and alarm systems in your buildings. Well, in compliance with the table, not every building. A sandstone 400X, a complete rewrite. Okay. I've spoken about this a lot in the past, and again, I'm looking at time. I've got 10 minutes. So I'm going to quickly peruse through this and point out a few things that that are very pertinent. Before I even go to the energy zone map versus a climate map, competence and who can design is an issue. The problem is that all architectural professionals, if they were taught properly, so I might be pointing fingers at education facilities here, should understand energy efficiency in terms of thermal comfort. And I would make a bold statement and say low-E glass in most of South Africa is actually a bad thing. For example, glass buildings generally for a hot climate would achieve the opposite of what you actually want. Whether you're using low-E glass or triple glazed buildings, etc., you're not achieving, you're fighting against nature, you're swimming against the current. So we need to change the way we think about thermal comfort. Another quick statement, some of these standards we're using ASHRAE standards and for example, based in America. The problem is that more than 80% of houses, I'm talking about H4 type buildings in America, have air conditioning, have artificial HVAC installed. In South Africa, the last study I looked at is less than 10%. So why would you want to use a standard that is designed for HVAC when the houses or buildings here are naturally ventilated? That's another big issue. So okay, let's get back quickly to energy zone map. The energy zone map might be good for people that do rationales using simulations. Not every building needs a simulation. If I'm building a middle income home wherever, I don't need to go and use expensive programs to simulate it. There are standards or there are methods that we've ancient man, when he was living in a cave and pulled out some branches to make a shelter, already knew about shading, about ventilation, and human comfort. So why do we need to go down this really expensive route when the amount of energy used? Think about a building without an HVAC, a H4 without an HVAC. How much of energy is actually used in thermal comfort if it's designed properly? A Natal veranda house in Natal or a Cape Dut style house in the Cape. I've seen studies that show it can go up to 50, 60% if it's not designed for the climate. And it can come down to maybe 10% if it is. So you're going to spend so much of money to save 50% of the 10%, so 5% energy. How long are you going to take to pay back that expensive study that you did and that expensive glass and that expensive insulation to save? The payback will be more than the lifespan of the building itself. So there's a major problem. Coming back to the climate zones, so the energy zone map might be good for the guys doing simulation, but if you are doing naturally ventilated methods, you got a big problem. And I'm just looking for the slide picture. Okay, it's towards the end, so sorry about that. But the point I'm trying to make is Cape Town and Pietermaritzburg are in the same zone, and if you're designing this using just naturally ventilated methods, Cape Town gets much colder than Pietermaritzburg or Port Nolloth. It's totally different climates. Don't confuse this map with a climate map. That's the point I'm making. SANS 204 is not referenced. That's another big one. And it almost seems like you're forced to use low E frames, low E glass and high R value frames. Shading has been expanded on, and examples are shown. These are my examples, but examples are to be shown in the new standard. But they don't actually show how to calculate it. That you need to go and do a study or a CPD for that. And all these are actually shading elements. So I'm quickly going to look at my time. I've only got literally 6 minutes. I think I've covered all the major factors that are relevant. I've spoken about the rest of them quite a bit. There's 9 questions still open, so I'm going to hop quickly to the questions and stop sharing for now.
Videsh, thank you so much. We've just given you an extra 10 minutes, so you can have some time to answer some of the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Really appreciate that. So I'm going to hop on to these questions. Ellie Kutsia. Many clients complain that they have to incur large costs to get their building compliant to building regulations, while same do not apply to informal settlements. Please can you refer me to the correct regulation or act where it defines that informal settlements do not have to comply with. Okay. There is informal settlements are technically illegal under the Act. So I'm not saying it's exempt, it's actually illegal. But due to other laws, it's almost impossible to remove an informal settlement after it's established. So there's a conflict in law. Yes, I have my own clients complaining about that also. But that's not a building regulation, or the building regulations can't really control it, because the building regulations are just saying, hey, that informal settlement is illegal. But going to court, there's other laws that then, yeah, you literally cannot change it. So until the building regulations itself gets changed to address these problems, it's been sitting in front of on the minister's desk, I believe, for the last 3 or 4 years. Hopefully it gets either goes back for public comment or gets approved soon. I can't really say anything else with regards to that question, Ellie. Just know that it's illegal. The Act doesn't allow for that. There's an anonymous attendee. How can professionals get involved in developing and improving on SANS documents in order to shape the industry? I did answer that previously in my earlier session. That was, I'll just restate that. Get involved in inspecting the public comments or when the documents are out for public comment, get involved in perusing the documents. Many people go in depth. I'm one of them that go in depth and do full studies. But peruse the document. If you feel there's something that's affecting or not right, comment on it. Everyone's allowed to comment. If you don't want to write yourself, write to your VA, write to SAIBD. It's not necessarily your VA. Write to SAIBD. There's a question by Setsogi. Morning, Videsh. Good morning. In a case where someone slips and falls due to wet surfaces in the building, whose responsibility is it? Can they only be held responsible, and why? Are there any laws of compliance due to safer walking floors? I would say I haven't come across it. I'm just talking from memory. I haven't come across a law specifically. I do know that there are laws that talk about non-slip for persons with disability. There is laws or standards that talk about escape routes, having or no trip hazards on escape routes, for example. It doesn't necessarily talk about wet floors. If a building is leaking or water is leaking into on the floor, that's obviously a maintenance issue. And if I'm not mistaken, one of the intents or part B talks about water intrusion into a building, but specifically water on the floor and someone slipping, not under the NBR. There are other laws. Any public building is subject to Ash Act. All public buildings are subject to Ash Act. Even your public or your private building is. But public buildings need inspection for health and safety, and a wet floor is a health and safety risk. So Ash Act will talk to that problem. Winner the what? This question is there any possibility in future local authority only approval in terms of zoning, improving neighborhood, architectural professional to take full responsibility for meeting NBR? If found not to have met, SACAP registration to be revoked. It sounds like a good idea. I don't know about the possibility. It's something that needs to be looked into. Yes, it can be a future. So I'll just say yes, there could be a possibility. To answer, that's another long discussion, but it may be a discussion we need to take forward. So again, looking at time, I'm going to say I'm going to go on to the next one because that is a long discussion. Is it not possible for the SANS 10400 updates to be part of our SACAP registration fee, considering we need them to do our jobs effectively? Tamron, this comes from Tamron Taunton. I understand the intent of what you're saying. I don't agree with the proposal to include it into our registration fee. I'm going to make another very bold statement. And the bold statement is that the regulations we have, so okay, the best way for me to describe this is you have the Constitution, the highest law of the country. You then have Act 103 of 77, which is a law in terms of our Constitution. You then have its regulations, which is, again, law. I'm going to stop there and say that all laws must be available free. I should not be able to go, or no one should charge me for me to go and inspect a law. For me to be informed whether I'm doing something illegal or not, I need to have the law available to me. What does the regulations then say? The regulation says if you have complied with SANS 10400, which you have a part, you have complied with the law. That makes SANS 10400 law, in my opinion. I'll even go further to say that people argue that it's not law because there are three options under the regulations. For example, one of them being, or the only other relevant one being that you can do a rationale and not necessarily do a deemed to satisfy. The counter argument is that even the rationale uses SANS as a minimum compliance level. So it's the measuring stick. If it is a measuring stick in terms of the law, then it must be provided for me free of charge because it is the law. And therefore, I say that the SANS 10400 suite of documents should be free. And many countries do it. The UK, for example, their standards are embedded in the regulation. So it's a regulation and a standard. And that's UK. Our laws are basically were based on the UK standards. So why is that not applicable in South Africa? I don't know. People, the word out there is that it's copyrighted and it's in terms of ISO, etc. I say if it is law, then laws must be free. You must be able to Google it, download it, print it, or you can go to a government printer and pay for a print. You don't pay for the knowledge behind it, you pay for the print. Tamron, I think I've answered your question. I think, Tamron, I think we all, including owners, including developers, including the profession, need to toy. Because SANS 10400 is law. And if you're going to charge me for it, then the municipality taking me for court or to court or because I'm non-compliant, I can claim ignorance. Why must I pay for it? Give it to me for free and then I can't claim ignorance. Okay, so hopefully people listen to the call and start toying with me. Sandy Stevens, can a draftsperson draw a fire exit plan for an existing building or a large shop? I don't see why not. Competent fire engineer is not necessarily required to draw a fire exit plan unless it is non-compliant. And it can be non-compliant if the distance, travel distances, etc. So if the draftsman know what they're talking about and understands the law, they are deemed to satisfy laws. And there's no restriction that stops the draftsman from drawing out that fire escape plan. Lavelle, next question. At what point can it be considered that the profession is over-regulated? Again, sometimes I make very bold statements. We are already overregulated. I don't know when we reached the tipping point. I think it was sometime in 2011. Overregulation is a bad thing. It can be too restrictive. If you look at currently how Part L is, or the amendments to Part L, and if you look at it and look at the amount of regulation in that, and if you look at the 80s or early 90s version of Part L, how many roofs have failed since the 90s to current? Roofs that are under 8 meters long. I'm talking about residential type buildings. For example, your standard Howie type truss that was designed by a architectural professional. Why do we now suddenly need to restrict who can design it? And it hasn't changed. It just become more regulated. Why? Was there a problem? So I'm saying we are already overregulated. We need to somehow, if we stand united, that's what I'm trying to say. If we stand united, people, we can topple this overregulation and in my point of view, making buildings too expensive for too little a positive outcome. Think about my statements earlier on that I made about Adobe type buildings. If you really think about it, we're so overregulated that something that actually works for thousands of years is suddenly illegal. And we say nothing about it. That's the problem. Hain has got a question. What do you do when building control approves an alternative building method, but when you get to NHBRC, they will not accept the building method? I say, again, I make some bold statements. The National Home Builders Regulation Council or Registration Council, that's the only reason it came around was because of banks, number one, and more importantly, because of the professional. It was our fault. It was the architectural professional's fault that you need a body now that says an adobe wall is illegal or a haystack wall is illegal or a fin builder wall needs major engineering for it to be legal, and that you cannot use on a shoulder cost type brickwork, brick ties which are stronger, but you need to use brick force, which any builder will tell you. Take a sledgehammer to two walls that are built that way and tell me which wall is stronger. It was our fault. And the reason it was our fault is very simple. We have allowed bad buildings to be built. In the past, we did work up to stage 4 or up to stage 6. Didn't detail it. The builder went ahead and built it. More importantly, SUM or CUMs, what we call blocks, what RDP housing is built with, is not cheap. People think it's cheap. It's cheaper to build with a block. It's not. Follow the standard. Follow the standard to build it in a structural method. It actually works out as expensive as brick. How many builders actually build it properly? How many builders go and put in the reinforcing and infill concrete, 10 MPa infill concrete, and build a ring beam at the top? I've seen buildings where I say demolish the whole building and rebuild it. So if we have not done our work We cannot really blame the NHBRC. I blame education. I've seen architectural professionals that never held a brick in their hand. They don't know how to put together a building. They know how to draw a pretty picture. So yes, I will say it's our fault. An architect is a builder, a thinker, a designer, an artist, all put together. He's not just an artist. He's a technologist. Archi means master, tech means machine or technology. So you're a master technologist. That's what architect means. Some way we've lost the plot, people. We need to get the plot back. Thanks, Hein, for the question. That's another very long topic. I don't know if I'm going over my time, Kelly. Please inform me. Be my timekeeper.
Hi, Videsh. You've got 5 minutes left.
5 minutes and 11 questions. I don't think I can do all. So the ones I don't answer people up front, I'm just going as they came along. So I'm not reading which is the most important one to answer. But what I will do is I will, under email, and Kelly will distribute the answers. There are this is from Tawanda. There are 2.9 to 3.6 million people living in informal settlements based on a conservative estimate in 2011. I'm sure it's gone much more than that. What has the NBR done in dealing with issues regarding fire, thermal comfort, etc.? My worry is that there is never any emphasis on these settlements. How can we, as built environment professionals, start engaging this aspect, which seems always overlooked? Yes, it is overlooked. Again, bold statement. This is not an NBR problem. This is a political problem. We need political will. And I'm just throwing an idea out there. It's just from my observation. Maybe it's just that some people actually, or some people in power, can find a following by encouraging informal settlements. We've seen it. The government, the local authority, provides housing for a settlement of 1,000 people. And not even a week later, that land that was occupied by those 1,000 people, suddenly you have another 1,000 people living there. And you hear it on the ground. You hear it. People say, our councillor asked us to come and move in here. So I'm saying this is not a national building regulation problem. It's a political problem. We need political will to change and solve this problem. Thanks, Tawanda. I hope I get the pronunciation of this name right. Abdul Razak. In a nutshell, what is the difference between the energy map and the climate zone map? It's actually not a nutshell, so it's like a few sentences, but it's what it says for a climate zone map. And the old climate zone map was wrong anyway because it didn't take microclimate into account. Okay. Howick or Peter Maritz, no, not Kloof in up the road here in Durban is not the same as Durban beachfront. Mpangeni is not the same climate. No, Mpangeni is fairly similar. But what I'm trying to say, microclimate is not taken into account. Now the difference is in this energy zone map, it's only telling you areas where the energy usage for thermal comfort is similar, falls within certain ranges. So what it's trying to tell you is that a building in Cape Town and a building in Pietermaritzburg both are zone 4. would use the same energy for heating and cooling. I don't agree with that. If you live in Pietermaritzburg and you live in Cape Town, you'd know that it's different. But that's what the map is saying. I'm saying, show me the evidence. Show me the historical record. I haven't seen it yet. It also puts far north, just north of Pretoria, that area. Can't recall the area's name now, but it puts that and Northern Natal both in Zone 5 and the coastal area of Natal into Zone 5H. The only difference between 5 and 5H is one is high humidity, one is medium or low humidity. I'm saying north of Pretoria, where Sun City is in that area, if I'm not mistaken, and Ulundi, they're not the same climate. And whether they use the same energy for heating and cooling, I don't know. But that's what it's trying to tell you. Okay, I spent too much time on that question. Buffalo City is now insisting on a professional engineer certificate before issuing a COC. If the contractor refuses to build according to regulations, please comment. I agree with the city. If you build illegally, if it's single story and the building looks compliant to, you can measure the wall thickness, for example. Yes, it might, you can't inspect how much of brick force was in it, but a lot can be inspected. But if I was sitting in the position of the building control officer, I would insist on a professional engineer certification, because no one knows how it was built. How do you inspect the foundations? How do you know the building is safe? How do you know the occupants of that building are going to be safe? So yes, I do agree with Buffalo City. Tamarin Totten, in terms of Prosca contracts, has the definition of design ever been defined so that it is not so open-ended? I have to say, Tamarin, I can't answer the question. I'm not too sure of the definitions there. I need to go and look at it and maybe get back to you, but thanks. Tabang Evans, how do you deal with the municipality that doesn't use bylaws? Bylaws are illegal. The municipality cannot write its own bylaw in terms of building. The building application that I spoke about in terms of the National Building Regulation, Section 4, the National Building Regulation declares that all bylaws by the municipality in terms of building, they can drop any other bylaw in terms of noise and roads and everything else. But in terms of building, bylaws don't exist. So the building inspector is not supposed to look at the bylaw. For example, Durban had a bylaw, and the old Quad de Guza municipality had a bylaw on air bricks. Air bricks are not a requirement in terms of the new regulations. Therefore, it doesn't exist. And if the building inspector says you have to put an air brick in, he can't. He's not mandated to do that. Durban municipality had a bylaw in terms of on-site sewer disposal. It was fought, and the municipality reverted back to the National Building Regulations eventually. So you cannot apply a bylaw, a municipal bylaw. In terms, if you are a owner or a professional, Tabang, you need to insist that the municipality follows the law and their mandate in terms of the National Building Regulations. Write to SAIBD if you have a specific case. Write to me, and I'll see how I can help. Bridget Brown. Do you know if the amendments to XA will take site-specific topographical features into account? Example, a large shading tree or in the shadow of a mountain. There are people and municipalities that don't want to do that. I declare it wrong. I personally, and people that know me will know, I provide CPD courses on energy efficiency. And a mountain will have an effect. If you on the eastern side of Table Mountain, if I'm on the eastern side of the amphitheater in the Drakensberg, the sun has set earlier for me. And the only way that can change is if that mountain disappears. So the municipality not taking into account is wrong. Now, in terms of the law, you can still get your plan approved. Okay, I don't have the act in front of me, but it is either option 2 or option 3. Now, one of the options of approval or methods of approval or compliance, should I say, says that a competent person, okay, I'm contextualizing it from I'm not going to quote it exactly, but if you are competent, you can do a rationale. You rationalize it. And the local authority is the only approval the local authority has to do from a legal point of view is authorize whether you are deemed competent or not. If they deem you competent, and obviously if there's a glaring mistake in your rationale, they'll point it out to you, go and correct it. But they, in theory, don't have to look at it. They look at the recommendation. That's what the law says. The law asks them to approve you as a competent person or not. Skalpina, hi Kelly, I'm over time, I would assume.
I'm going to make 6 people very unhappy as I have to ring the bell on this session. Okay. We'd just like to thank you so much, and of course SAIBD's support and accreditation for this session. I think we've seen from the chat that everybody's really pleased with the outcome of your presentation and of course for answering their questions. So thank you very much, Videsh, and to all those joining us. To the 7 people left in the question and answer box, your questions will be sent to Videsh and he will try to answer them in the coming week, and it will be sent to you in the next mailer. So thank you so much. We look forward to hosting our next session at 2 o'clock today, which is accredited by SAIBD. So Videsh, thank you so much. And I think due to popular demand, we most likely will have a follow-up to our
I'm making a very quick call. 1 second, Kelly. I'm making a very quick call. I'm seeing, excuse me, we went on for 1.5 hours. I'm increasing the credit value on the CPD on this. So thank you all for attending.
Thank you, Videsh.
And have a good afternoon.
And that's good news for all our attendees, as Videsh just confirmed he is increasing the CPD credit for this session. So thank you very much. Videsh, we'll be in touch and we'll chat again soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.